Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. Case file number 1319, written by boopieboopieboopie, a nighttime drive like no other. This happened about 10 years ago, when I was 17. I was in Tampa, visiting my aunt and grandma. They lived 2 turns off a very long, fairly main road, and I always remember this weird-looking building about halfway down the road on the left. The architecture was super specific, and was the only building for quite a ways on either side, about 3/4 of a mile from the first turn to get to the house. It always stuck out to me as a kid as my marker that we were just around the corner. One night, I went to a concert about 1.5 hours to 2 hours away. My aunt let me borrow her car, and I had to pick up another girl along the way. She lived about 20 minutes from my aunt's, and I had to get on the freeway to get to their house. I picked her up, and we went to the concert. Then I drove her home. I can't remember the exact time of night, but it was late enough that very few cars were left on the roads, I believe sometime between 12 to 2 a.m. This girl lived in what I would describe as a swampy suburbs. There were lots of family homes, but the roads weren't paved super well. There were no street lamps, no sidewalks, and it was windy and confusing. It was not a clearly laid out grid, and I absolutely needed my GPS to guide me in and out. A couple minutes after I dropped her off and started my 20-minute journey back to my family's house, I noticed that my phone had only 2% left. I immediately started speeding to get out of the confusing, windy roads of this neighborhood before I lost my GPS. My aunt called me to ask me where I was, and I said, "I can't talk, I only have 2% on my phone." My phone died. I was in a practically pitch-black neighborhood with no sign of any main roads or any clear direction on how to get out. It felt like I was in a never-ending maze. I went down road after road, flipping U-turns in random dark driveways, hitting dead ends every other turn. I was screaming and panicking, hitting the steering wheel with my hands. I was so scared. But after 5 to 10 minutes of this, I had an insane sense of calm wash over me. In an instant, I knew it was all going to be okay and that God, I was Christian at the time, no longer, would guide me home. I knew there was no way something bad was going to happen to me, and that felt like a fact. It was bizarre, like my body knew something I didn't. The next turn I took, I was spit on a new road. I turned right and immediately noticed a weird building by my aunt's house, literally on the corner. I turned around in the parking lot, went back down the road to their house, putting the building back on my left. I was home less than 10 minutes after I'd dropped the girl off and got back through the suburbs, when earlier that night it took me 20 minutes on the freeway. But here's the kicker. The next day, I wanted to see what street I had come out of the night before, and I kid you not, there was no street there. Not even close. The next street that I would have been able to turn off from would have been the first to get to my family's, about 3/4 of a mile down. But when I turned onto the main drag the night before, the weird building was immediately on my right. This has always been such an insane memory of mine, and I know whoever I tell it to thinks I must have just missed the street somehow. But I went through every possibility and it just wasn't there. That, on top of it taking me a significantly shorter amount of time to get home from that girl's house, especially after panicking and going down random dead ends, adding 5 to 10 minutes at least. Plus getting home in that amount of time through a neighborhood when before I had to take the freeway to get to their house, and the inexplicable knowing that I was going to be alright, and the literal next turn putting me on the literal only landmark I know in that area. I literally feel like I was transported. Case notes file 1319, a nighttime drive like no other. So it was almost like you were indeed in a maze of roads that were not cleared, not paved, not known. Reminds me of, in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, towards the end, the maze test, where the maze itself was changing. Now, I don't think the physical reality of the maze was changing, but maybe you were switching between universes where in different universes, roads were there, where in others they weren't, and then eventually you came back to your real universe, but you moved through space itself too. And I think in these transition points where we are traveling between universes, this is accomplished via space-time portals, and sometimes those portals just take us in the same universe. If we traverse back and forth, then we have to deal with the fact that we are getting transported, and time itself can be messed with too. So I think that would explain how you had this discombobulating experience where you were in a different place, where you exited a road that wasn't even there the next day when you went back to check. It was in a different universe. You couldn't find it here. But no matter the explanation, it would never feel safe to drive in that area again. Bonus file written by Delta Juliet 57. The Mysterious Ancestral Estate. Our grandparents have this ancestral house that we used to spend the first week of summer vacationing in. When we're there, we usually stay in the guest house because it is newer and more comfortable. Beds are new, there's hot and cold water, big TV, etc. And frankly, the old house is also a bit scary, given that it's old and no one really has lived there for years. Only the caretakers are there the rest of the year, and they have their own little place on the side of the property, so they don't actually live in the old house. One time, us kids were playing. I happened to look at the direction of the old house, and I find my younger cousin standing on the second floor ledge. I immediately called for help. Eventually, we got him down safely. When we ask him how he got there, he has no memory of the whole thing. The last thing he remembers is that he was riding his bike. The next thing he knew, everyone was calling him, panicking, and trying to get him down. We also couldn't figure out how he could have gotten there because he was around 7 or 8 at the time and the ledge is on the second floor, so there's no way he could have reached it. The only way to get to it is using a ladder or through the library window. There was definitely no ladder nearby because the caretaker had to run to the garage to get the ladder. There's also no way he could have gone through the library because it is locked and the window has been practically bolted shut because no one has opened it in years. We never figured out what happened. To this day, my cousin still has the hole in his memory, but he said he has random dreams about a disenchanted voice coming from the library window calling his name. Case notes for the bonus file. The Mysterious Ancestral Estate. So someone took physical possession of your cousin. There's no way he could have done it himself, and even more evidence is towards the end of the story where he says that he heard some voice calling to him, at least later in life when he thought about it. Isn't it crazy that we can be possessed this way? Then you think about how this could potentially connect to people who sleepwalk. Maybe they're being possessed by spirits, and it's easier when someone is sleeping to take control of their body. But maybe not full control. When people sleepwalk, they tend to repeat a certain pattern, and it usually relates to their own personality, but not always. Maybe they find themselves doing something weird, like flipping a light switch, or looking at themselves in the mirror, or even doing more advanced tasks that shouldn't be possible in a sleep-like state. A possession event from a spirit. I wonder if that spirit had jumped from the high-up ledge there in their own life, and now, again, just repeating that pattern as spirits tend to do. That would be very sad. At least you got him down, though. Happy ending as it goes. And now time for the quote of the day. You can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all of the time. Abraham Lincoln. So the first thing I want to say to this is no one is immune to propaganda or lies or being tricked. So if you are tricked or fooled and later on in life you realize, yeah, I messed up, I believed something that wasn't true, I was led by emotion or any other thing like that, it's okay, as long as you admit it to yourself and to others. If you mess up, just admit to it, own it, and then improve and try to not fall for it again later on. You see a lot of this in politics, of course, but not just politics itself, but events that push us into, and like 9/11 and the war that, came after that. It was mostly led by emotion. It is a question on what we should do when we're attacked, but I think those decisions shouldn't be made in emotion. And now with more recent events that I don't even want to mention, just inevitably it just ends with a lot of innocent people dying, and I just find that very sad. But the silver lining is, in the long term, you can't fool everyone all the time. The truth will out eventually. That's something good to rest on. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.